Welcome to the MasterYourMix podcast, helping engineers, producers, and artists create professional recordings and mixes, even from home. I'm your host, Mike and Davina. Let's get started. Hey, welcome to the MasterYourMix podcast. My name is Mike and Davina, and thank you so much for being here. Man, it has been a long time since I've released a new podcast episode, and right off the bat, I just want to say how good it feels to be back here and making more episodes. And I also want to just apologize for taking so long to get back with another episode. Admittedly, I wasn't planning on taking a break, but then I started working on a brand new coaching program, which is where I work one-on-one with my students and I help them throughout a project, whether that's working on a song or mixing an album. And the focus is on giving you regular feedback, ongoing mix reviews, doing one-on-one calls to work through your process and get clear on your workflow, and so much more. It's really about helping you become completely independent with your music productions and feeling confident at every stage of the process. So if you're interested in learning more about that and you want to sign up, visit MasterYourMix.com/coaching, and you and I can hop on a call and we can talk about it a little further. Now, space is really limited for this because of the time involved in the ongoing support that I offer my students. I'm only accepting 5 people at a time, but right now, as we speak, I've got a few spots open. So if you're interested in signing up, definitely make sure to hit me up. Again, that's MasterYourMix.com/coaching. So with that said, now that I've got this coaching program done and I've started to see some amazing results with my students that are inside of it, I actually have a little bit more bandwidth than me now to put some more energy into building the podcast up again and getting more episodes going. So with that said, my guest today is Julian Emery. He is a composer, a producer. He used to be a session guitar player. He's had quite an amazing career, and he's worked with artists such as Nothing But Thieves, Lissie, Simple Plan, Gavin DeGraw. The guy has written for many, many big acts and continues to put out hit after hit. And in this conversation, we get really deep into the world of songwriting. And I think you're going to find this really interesting. He gives us a lot of really great perspective on getting into the industry, finding your strengths, and finding the patterns that allow you to showcase your talents in the best way possible. So I think you're going to love this interview. Let's just jump right into it. All right, Julian Emery, thank you so much for being on the MasterYourMix podcast. How you doing?
No problem. Yeah, very good. Thanks. Very good.
That's great. For people who might not be familiar with who you are, can you give us a little bit of your background on kind of who you are, what you do, how you got into the production and the whole world of music here?
Yeah, sure. So I am a guitarist by trade. My dad was a classical musician and my mum's sister in the arts as well. So I grew up in that kind of household. Started playing guitar when I was about 15. I got madly into Rush and AC/DC when I was 11 and just, had found my genre and found that I love rock, love the excitement of rock. And I liked, great drums and vibey bass and distorted guitar sound. So yeah, I started playing guitar, and then I think like a lot of guitarists just got into cover bands, Blues Brothers cover band and a this and a that type of genre, lots of different types of genres, and gigged around for a few years. So that was my early learning. But also I was lucky enough to have a small studio in the house. My dad had I don't know if you remember the old Ampex 8 tracks with a DBX noise reduction system and a few mics, and my dad had timpani hanging around and lots of percussion instruments, vibraphones and marimbas and stuff. So I was really privileged to grow up with that around me, and then I kind of cut my teeth in the studio with my dad's setup, which I think he used a bit himself, and then I think the plan was for me to get to just to leave it there for me to use. So that I'm very thankful for that.
That's amazing. So it was your dad that got you really into music then. As far as the recording, were you learning from him how to get started with that?
No, my mum and my dad really got me into the music. I guess he was like a tune percussion player, and I had a lot of contemporary composers playing in the house, not actually, but I mean, their music playing now, Stockhausen, Boulez, Messiaen. And then, my mum was into the shows. We had West Side Story playing, and we had Buddy Rich, and we had Chicago. We had a bit of pop music, but not much. As Chicago, that was pretty much it, and a bit of ABBA. I kind of started doing my own thing, which is away from my dad's style of music. So I just potted around on my own, and I was recording drums first. I think I did that, and then started getting into guitar recording, but I was really making it up as I went along. So I'm one of those guys. I didn't have a formal engineering education. I just played it by ear.
I think, some of the best engineers start off that way, right? Because I think there's something to be said for when you're in that kind of stage of like naivety, almost like you haven't been taught any rules to follow or anything like that. Sometimes you kind of learn the best by trial and error,
Yeah, I think so. I think that's applicable to learning an instrument as well, isn't it? It's often best when you make it up yourself and you're not taught classically, as in given a route to follow. But with engineering, that was my reality. But from working in the States a lot, I've found there's much more of a culture of engineering there, or the older guys are passing it down to the younger guys. I think in the UK, I'm really making a sweeping statement here, and there are exceptions to the rule, but there are a lot of guys that kind of make it up as they go along a bit, and maybe I'm saying that because I didn't, because I was on the musician side of things, I didn't go and become an assistant at one of the studios. I didn't watch great producers do what they do, so. Yeah, I kind of had to make it up, and I'm still figuring it out. Actually, 30 years later, but maybe it's the best way to do it for me. I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's definitely something to be said for just kind of learning on your own, and I guess it's also the people who get the best results out of that are the ones who obviously push themselves and who really want it badly enough that they do push themselves to learn and make mistakes and keep going when they make those mistakes. And, I think that you have to have a certain persistence to make this work if you're going to do it on your own.
Yeah, I think you're right. I'd sometimes see in studios the assistant kind of sitting around staring into space, and I think, man, there's so much you could be asking everyone in this room, or you could be doing things. I mean, I know it's quite arduous in the studio sometimes, isn't it? And it's long hours, and it's easy to get a bit lethargic with it all. But yeah, you're right. If you really got a thirst for knowledge, then it's really useful. And I always I say to people these days, if I could go in and watch Mutt Lange or a really well respected producer in the studio work with the knowledge I have now that I've acquired on my own, I'd be able to put that. My new knowledge now, I'd learn at a really fast rate because, I've learned a lot of the principles, but I'd love to see, those really great, fantastic guys at work. Oh, well, I have actually. I've been in the studio there, and it's brilliant to watch those guys that are dedicated engineers, that have 30 plus years experience, which are absolutely brilliant.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that. So you were kind of just learning on your own. What was that transition like from being the musician, kind of doing the self-produced stuff, kind of learning it as you're going? What was that transition like to start doing it on a professional level?
I had the good fortune to have a best friend a guy called James Nisbet, who's Belinda Carlisle's long-term guitar player, to have my best friend be a guitar player. So we were competitive and jealous whenever the other one got a little break into something. So I had someone to spar with and someone to egg me on, which was brilliant. So we were both doing similar kind of gigs together. He went to Bearsville Studios for a few years, and then he came back and he got the Belinda Carlisle gig. This was a long time ago, and I had a little light bulb moment, which was, I was still playing with cover bands, but because he got the gig, I thought, well, okay, I know Jim's playing well, and I think I could do the same. and it spurred me on to find something for myself. And actually, he gave me some depth. I did a few TV appearances with my on guitar, I think for Belinda. Was it Belinda? Yeah. And then I managed to land myself my first pop gig, which was with a band called Atomic Kitten, who were quite big in the UK at the time. I attribute that to my pal Jim and to Tony Robbins. Are you familiar with Tony Robbins, Mike?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So,
I wasn't sure if you're talking about like that
Tony
Robbins.
I'm a big Tony Robbins fan. I just utilize his practices, and I think because I saw a friend that was playing in arenas. I think his first gig was a Tina Turner support. And I thought, okay, well, I've got a vision now. I can kind of smell it. And, you get psyched up, and there's something in your unconscious, I think, whispers to you. And, I could just feel that excitement knowing that was a reality for myself. So I kind of willed it. I willed my first gig. I did gigs around London. Whatever gig I did, I would do it to the nth degree. If someone asked me to learn 5 songs for the set, I'd learn the 5 and another 5 just in case, and I'd learn them inside out and back to front. And I think people saw my enthusiasm and tenacity and thought, okay, well, he's going to be a good asset for us, and he's going to be reliable, and he can play a bit. So let's hire him, and they did.
That's amazing. So you basically jumped into being a session guitar player, which is that's incredible, and that's a hard gig for a lot of people to break into. So I mean, kudos to you for getting in there. That's amazing. What do you think it is that So I think you're actually the first person that I've had on this podcast who did that route first of being a session musician. So I'm curious to know, what do you think it is? What do you think it takes to become a successful studio musician, or working in a band, touring live? What do you think it takes to keep a good spot on a good tour there?
Okay, to break into a tour, to the session guitar playing scene, do you mean?
Yeah, and to get into touring and being a session guitar player, what do you think it takes to be someone who's successful in that industry? Because there's a million guitar players that are super talented. So why should they keep you?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. I think I can only talk about my experience. Of course, I think I benefited because I had a producer's ear, meaning that when I was on stage with the cover band, if the balance wasn't right on stage, I used to feel really uncomfortable. I wouldn't want my guitar as the loudest thing. I'd want it I'd want to hear my guitar as I'd hear it on a record. And I had a sensibility for the overall sound, for the overall picture, which is a good attribute to have, I think, because you're not just focused on what you're doing. You're serving the artist then, and you're trying to play sensitively to music you've been given. So I think having a producer's ear, I see it in some musicians don't have it, and they're just wrapped up in their own world, and they're not concerned with the balance of the band, especially, or the groove or the feel, or that the singer's struggling over, they're playing too loudly and the vocal's not cutting across. So I think it's good to hone that part of your armory. And also, it's not getting drunk and embarrassing yourself, just getting on with people and showing that you're not too argumentative or not too much reliability. I really think, because you spend so much time with people on tour, you want the people you're with to feel company to feel comfortable in your company. So that helps. If you're I mean, actually, I used to feel uncomfortable a lot of the time, but when I was a bit younger, but I could got on with people, and I could hang out. So I think those, and obviously it goes without saying, you need to be able to play well. And when I say play well, it's not especially knowing all the modes and being able to whiz around the fretboard. It's to be able to groove, to have a good sound. The sound you generate is so important. I know that sounds obvious, but it's not always obvious.
Yeah, musicians love to kind of just serve themselves sometimes, right? So it kind of like goes back to what you said about you should actually be serving the song, serving the artist, serving the performance, rather than, just showing off your skills or whatever it is, like there's definitely, yeah, I think that definitely ties in really well to the production side of it, because it makes sense that if you were approaching being a session guitar player that way, then it makes sense that as a producer, you've got this vision of what the song is supposed to look like, what it's supposed to sound like, what the tones are supposed to feel like, and all that kind of stuff. So it really kind of makes sense that you went that route, like you already had that vision.
Yeah, I think so. And I was always most comfortable in the studio. I think, I was interested in that. I should say, actually, before I did this, I've missed a little bit of a chunk out. When I was between 19 and 22, I found a company that kind of did cover recordings, and we did some of the shows, some of the big shows, and all kinds of stuff. And they kind of I worked for this company for quite a few years, and it was just brilliant to cut my teeth in the studio on that. And I also just gave me an appreciation for what we've just been talking about. Yeah, to play appropriately for something and to have a broader view of the song, not just the guitar parts. I mean, I'm still guilty of that. It makes me laugh when you sit with a band in the studio and you're listening back to something you've just recorded. And I know the bass player's listening to the bass, the singer's listening to the vocals, the drummer's listening to the drums, the guitar's listening to the guitar. And the bass player could be playing in completely the wrong key, but the guitarist won't hear it because he's just focused on his parts. But yeah, I think, I think I had that sensibility anyway. So yeah, it's just, having an appreciation for the whole thing. Yeah. For the whole sound of the song.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and yeah, I love that visual of like the band listening to their own element, or their own instrument, because it is totally what happens, And I think that's just personally, like that was one of the biggest lessons I learned as a musician working with other producers was like learning to listen to other people in the band, because once you do that, your songs become so much better. You become a better musician. You know how to work with the other people in your band a lot better. I just think it's such an important thing to really pay attention to what else is going on in the mix other than your own part.
Oh yeah, definitely.
For sure. Awesome. So you were doing like the session musician stuff, you were on tour. Where did the songwriting side of it come for you?
Like most of us, I'd been writing stuff since I was 15, and I just kept that side of me going, and I was plagiarizing a lot, like you do when you start out. But I start after, I was playing with Atomic Kitten. I was playing with quite a few different pop artists, and with the first kind of manifestations of the X Factor, Pop Idol, it was called. Those shows. I was doing house band stuff, so I was getting to meet different artists. Started badgering A&R guys, and I could tell I was annoying them, but I just wanted an opportunity to do a B-side on something. And actually, I was playing with a girl over here called Kim Marsh, and she needed a couple of B-sides or something, and I managed to get into Metropolis Studios and get her to sing a song that I'd written. And Paul Adam, an A&R guy, who was he with at the time, Island Records, I think, finally let me, do the B-side. And I put everything I had into it. I just made sure it was as good as possible. I had the best musicians on it. Again, over this time, I'm still listening to Tony Robbins, man. I'm still trying to push. I think I probably put people's noses out of joint, and I think that's okay. I wasn't a bad man. I was just ambitious, to quote Jeff Beck there. Yeah, I just kind of I just willed myself into it, and as the fate would have it, or the universe was moving around in my favor at the time, or at least that's how it felt. I had another friend of mine. I'm very privileged to have a friend, and some friends actually that were in a band called A. It's a guy's name's Jason Perry, and his brother was on drums, Adam. And I'd met them in my teens through a mutual friend who was a huge Rush fan. We've all been huge Rush fans since we were 11. And I'm sure being Canadian, you understand the...
Oh, yeah. I've had multiple engineers that have worked with Rush on this podcast. It seems to be like, that's the band that for a lot of people gets people going.
Yeah, you either never heard of them or you die for them. You've got these obsessive fans, and of which I am, and Jason is, and Adam is. They'd been in quite a successful band, A, in the UK, around Europe, and their band was kind of coming to an end, and they were looking to write with some pop rock acts. And we just coalesced just at the same time as a band called Busted, who were a really big band here. They were huge at the time. They just sold out 12 Wembley arenas, and then one of the guys decided he wanted to leave the band right at the pinnacle of their success. But fortunately for us, actually Jason bagged the gig, and then recruited me to help out, to co-produce with him and to co-write with one of the members, a guy called Matt Willis. So that was then my break from doing this B-side. I was badgering Paul Adam. Paul Adam was also involved with this band Busted. So just all the stars aligned, and I managed to will myself into that gig as well. And had it not been for Jason and Adam, it wouldn't have happened for me. And they got me in there. They were considered cool by Matt Willis. I don't think he thought I was very cool at all. But Jason and Adam managed to blag me into the gig, and then that really started me off. And there's an important lesson there, which is what certainly for me, which is to have as broad a circle of friends as possible. And that doesn't mean people in the music industry. It just means that, if I can cite two guys in my life that have made such a dramatic change for me. One of this, and they're both, neither are in music, but they just had mutual friends that were in music, and they hooked us up. Quite oftentimes people just say, "Oh, I know another musician. You should meet and have a chat." And if it hadn't been for those two guys, I would have taken a completely different path, I think. So that was just fantastic, and I managed to get into a band, one of the biggest pop rock bands, kind of tailor-made for the kind of music I liked, and landed the gig.
That's amazing. I love that. And I love, there's a lot to unpack out of this story so far. And, I think, definitely the Tony Robbins thing, I'm starting to see it a lot more. It's like that power of persistence, and just that determination and unleashing the power within, or whatever. It definitely seems to be coming up quite a bit in your story, just as far as just pushing yourself to move forward and to I love the networking side of it too. I totally agree with that. I think having a big network is super important, because the more people the more chances you can kind of create for yourself sometimes, right? Exactly,
yeah. And I know the States and Canada are a bit bigger places than the UK, but still, it just makes sense, doesn't it? Yeah, just by dint of the numbers. Good to know as many people as possible to get the word around.
Absolutely. So you had your break there, and then that led to you working with tons of amazing artists. And, you have, when I look at your catalog, you have a wide range of artists that you've written and produced music for, everyone from Lissie, Simple Plan, Nothing But Thieves, what do you think it is about you that makes you so successful in working in different styles of music?
That's a good question. I think when you get signed to a publisher, firstly, the publisher has you writing with lots of different people. They just throw mud at the wall and see what sticks. And so you get to meet lots of people in different areas. And then over time, you figure out what kind of things you're best at. So I think, actually, I've just done a kind of a yacht rocky type of thing recently. and realized that Chicago had a big, because my mum and dad were playing it, and I love those horn sections. I love the way Chicago sounds. I'm talking about Chicago before they went in, to their 80s, more of their 80s sound. The 70s Chicago is incredible. So, and also the cover bands I was doing. I was in a band called Utter Madness that used to do Madness songs, which was ska, and then you do your Blues Brothers, and gets you into to appreciate soul and blues. So I think and as you get older, you realize, I've got rock written down, in my core, Maiden, AC/DC, Rush, Saxon, all that good stuff. But the older you get, the more kind of styles you try out. And also, I think, which has been quite interesting for me, there are similarities in rock music, for instance. There is quite a lot of dramatic chord changes. And I find that I can move to another genre. If that other genre has dramatic chord changes, then it instantly appeals to me. So there's lots of crossover. It doesn't have to be the same genre, but if there's often, in fact, get this, there were two music writers on this Matt Willis album I did, myself and Dan Carter, and I wrote 5 songs. He did the music for 5 songs, and we went through all our songs, and all my songs are pretty much the same chords, and all his songs are the same chord sequence. I mean, there's slight variation, once some relative minors going on and whatnot, but pretty much we're both sticking to the same kind of patterns. So if you find that pattern in a different genre of music, then bang, you're into it. And that was quite a revelation for me.
I love that. That's an amazing way to look at it, because I think there are some people who just view themselves as, they pigeonhole themselves in one genre, and that's all they know. There's there's no straying outside of that. That's just all they do. But I love that you're able to find those patterns that allow you to cross into those different genres. And I imagine that has to be fairly rewarding, because it kind of keeps things fresh for you. You're not doing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, exactly. When you're doing over over 3 decades, you want some variety, and and also, I'm a big fan of drummers and drums. I used to listen to all those fusion guys, Dave Weckl and Vinnie Colaiuta and Steve Gadd, along with Neil Peart, or Peart, I should say. So anything that celebrates drums, which Rush does, which obviously Buddy Rich does, big band stuff does, anything with great rhythms, regardless of genre, I'm just instantly gets my attention. I'm sure you have the same kind of thing. Even if it's not drums, rock feels like a celebration of instruments. It's certainly a celebration of guitar, and I think it's a celebration of drums as well. They get to be flamboyant in rock. So whatever the genre, I'm into it.
It's interesting, because I do feel like music evolves so frequently, and you just said that you find patterns in music, and that allows you to have that crossover. How, as a writer, especially someone who is working in multiple genres, how do you keep on top of that changing musical landscape so that you're kind of continuously working at a modern, high caliber level?
There's a writing camp I went on one time, and I've been on a lot of writing camps, and I don't know if you're familiar with these, or when you're signed to a publisher. I was signed to Warner Chappell for 8 years, and then BMG, and now with Peer. But they organise, a long weekend or a week with other writers, and you go and meet other writers and you write together. And on this particular writing week, it was in a castle in France, and you had there were 3 Brits there, 20 Americans, and a few other Europeans, and we set 6 rooms up, and they each had a producer in. I was kind of the rock guy, and there was an R&B room, and there was a country room, and you'd have to write a song with some of the the great writers in the world, the wealth of talent that was at that place, just off the chart. And each day you get to write with a different 2 other people, so 3 or 4 people in the room each day, and then you finish your song, and then I had a mobile Pro Tools rig with me. You have to then finish the song and play it to everyone that night at dinner in the dinner hall in the castle. So there's a lot of pressure to put on yourself, and also you're working with people outside your safe genre. So I'd have a couple of R&B singers come in the room, and it's quite easy to panic in those moments. I felt like a bit of a fraud, but all that needs to happen is that I picked up a guitar and you play something from the heart, and then everyone's on board because they feel it too. If you're feeling the emotion there, and it doesn't really matter, then you realize that actually the genre is not so important. You can just bring what you find emotional and find inspiring to another musician or singer, and they will respond emotionally in kind. And that was really liberating. And everyone pretty much got on with everyone. Everyone was at a certain level, but everyone hit it off and found common ground, and we just had an absolute blast for a week. It was so much fun, and we got some cuts out of it too. But yeah, there are patterns and there are aspects of music that, if they resonate to you, they're going to resonate with. The likelihood is they're going to resonate with most other musicians, because no musician, or I don't meet musicians that are blinkered. Musicians usually open-minded people, right?
Yeah. I love that. That's amazing though. Like it's so true that, at the end of the day, it kind of doesn't really matter what the song sounds like, how small it may sound or how big the production may be. At the end of the day, if it touches you, if you feel that energy or that emotion out of the vocals and the music, then that's what's going to ultimately make it feel like a good song.
Yeah, exactly. And there's such a Venn diagram of what constitutes a great little excerpt of music. I mean, I could just pick up the guitar now and we could have a room full of people, or someone could pick up a guitar and just play something that they love, and everyone else is going to respond to that. No one's going to go, that's just left me a bit cold. And that's great. It means that you can, you have a good chance of connecting with other musicians. Yeah.
I love that. That's great. So since you write for so many different artists, and I'm assuming that when you go to these songwriting camps, you're generally are you instructed as to like who the artist may be that you're writing for? Is that a common thing?
It is, yeah, but generally what I do now, the way I've kind of carved out a little niche for myself. When I started out, I was writing with lots and lots of people, and you'd have a lot of good experiences, but not all the songs were getting cut, and it just wasn't commercially viable to do that. And in recent times, I've just figured out the way I like to work, which is doing a body of work maybe over 5 or 10 years with a band or an act, and just concentrating on those guys and stockpiling ideas for just a few acts. And that's the way it seems to work best. I do stockpile, I'll always use a voice recorder on my phone, just get all my ideas down when I'm having them, and then, bring them into a writing room. And usually then we have a starting point, or sometimes not, start something fresh.
Yeah, that makes sense. So how do you get in a headspace to write for those specific artists? Like, are you trying to kind of write as if you are them, or are you kind of just writing your own songs and hoping that resonates with their feelings as well?
Yeah. So usually I'll listen to what they've done, and I'll usually from a production point of view, because I want to get the sounds right and try and figure out their musical sensibilities, but I don't get too hung up on that. And what I find is that I think I'm right in saying we all have our rituals when we write. You go to any band or artist, and they will usually, like I was talking earlier, that all my chord sequences are the same. There are patterns with any writer that certainly over the course of a few years they'll have got, that they'll have honed. And all it takes sometimes is someone coming in and changing the starting point of a song. You know, maybe the main songwriter in a band always starts with acoustic and his fingers are landed somewhere around A minor and F. Or they're the kind of player that does something very percussive, or it's a keyboard player that will resort to something slow and emotional. All it takes sometimes is just for someone else to come in and start with their starting point, their little ritual, for then the band to adopt that and then run with it in their own way. And then all of a sudden you've got something that they wouldn't normally default to. Do you see what I mean? And that sometimes that's all you need to do, I think. And then you're off to the races. And it doesn't always work, but usually, the bands that I've done well with, we're into usually I need someone that's into a bit of drama or emotional chords, that's similar kind of sensibilities. There conversely, there are sessions that haven't worked out where I've realized after an hour when I'm trying to go to one chord and someone else is going to another, or I'm trying to go for one melody and the artist keeps changing it. I'm thinking it doesn't matter how long we go at this, we're just not going to find common ground because we work differently emotionally. We'll always have common ground. I'm contradicting myself now. But we'll always have some kind of common ground. But usually if someone doesn't go to the kind of chord shapes and melodies that I like, then I know we're probably not going to get something really, really good.
Yeah. So in cases like that, because I think that's a very common thing, right? Like, people, even in their bands, you're all jamming together and there's always someone who has an idea and maybe they're riffing on a specific thing and they're in their zone thinking like, this is the way this has to be. And there's someone else who's thinking, oh, it has to be this way. And like when you're in that kind of situation, how do you get out of those, how do you ultimately turn those into either a good song or did you just abandon it and kind of, accept that, maybe this isn't working, or maybe these are two different songs? What does that process normally look like for you?
Well, usually I'll go to sleep. I'll just take myself out of the situation and let other people get on with it now and just not get in the way. Because you don't need to, when you're in a room, it's usually 3 or 4 people. I tend to prefer to work with 3 people in a room. 2 people in a room you know what it's like being in a room with 2 people. It's much more intimate, isn't it? And if you feel the need maybe to keep the conversation going, especially if you don't know someone that well, when there's 3 people, person A can talk to a person B, then person B can talk to C, and then C can talk to A, and then B can go to the toilet, or A can make a cup of tea, and then it's just a different dynamic. And you got 3 or 4 people in a room. I find it makes for a more comfortable writing room, and comfortable people write good ideas or channel good ideas.
I love that. That's so true. And I love that you seem to really have, and obviously like you've got lots of experience doing this, but you seem to have a very clear vision of what your strengths are. You found your patterns in your own writing to identify your songwriting strengths. And you've also found the patterns in your work environment that you appreciate that allow you to be creative. That it's quite amazing.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I think I've got it right for myself now. Yeah. And you need to enjoy the day, don't you? It sounds obvious as well, but it's not always right. I figured out that when I was writing too much, I actually thought to myself, I don't enjoy writing very much with other people. Actually, what I enjoy now, and the way I've configured my studio and my my working life is that I spend 80% of my time on my own. Now, I'm not isolated. I talk to people and I love socializing on the phone or, through not through Skype, usually using Zoom. And, but I enjoy only a limited time with other people. And then I like to go back to my workstation and just, have a sleep, watch a video, watch some YouTube, tinker around on the guitar a bit, do some mixing and some production, and have my own agenda, which you can't do when you're with other people, can you? Because you have to kind of...
There's the pressure, right?
Well, you can't. Yeah, I can't really start cracking open Netflix and watching a film when other people are trying to write a song. So yeah, I think after time, most people, we all find our the favorite way to spend our day.
Absolutely. I love that. That's great. So what about writer's block? Because that's obviously something that every songwriter gets at some point. How have you learned to deal with that?
Well, I'll bring in my second guru, which is Eckhart Tolle, and I practice acceptance with that. Yeah, it's a little spiritual thing, I guess. Some people would call it. You just learn to embrace the discomfort. Now, I think because as I spend most of my time writing, I've become a bit of a machine. My unconscious knows to throw me up as many ideas as possible. So I don't usually have dry periods. And I know that all I have to do is go for a run, keep myself fit, and my body will channel some ideas for me. So it's okay. I'll always manage to come up with something. Tony Robbins has this, idea that you should write for the bin sometimes. So write something that you're going to throw away, and in doing that takes the pressure off you and just gets the cogs going without putting pressure on yourself. So that's how I keep things going, and I'm never short of an idea or two. Whether they're any good or not is another question, of course. But I find in a writing room, now that can be, I think that's probably what puts a lot of people off writing, is the discomfort being with a stranger and feeling embarrassed that you don't have any chemistry, or you're not coming up with an idea that's very good. And there's lots of nuance to that. Often people will just say that they like an idea because they don't want you to feel bad, and you don't want to make them feel bad. So you both run with something you're not really into, and then, you can start to panic. And after hour 3, you still not got something. But I now embrace the discomfort. So I think to myself, I'm now for the next half an hour, I'm going to feel really uncomfortable. I'm not going to try and change it. And then usually in doing that, once you accept that's the way it is, the feeling disperses and you've moved through it.
That's great. I love that too. And I also, the idea of, like you said, writing stuff for the bin, something you think you're going to just throw away, it totally relieves that pressure from yourself, so that you're willing to just try something different, willing to accept it if it sucks, But I'm sure there's a lot of gold that comes from those songs as well, right?
Yeah, definitely. And often it's a process of illumination. And in a writing room, I find you need to go down a number of avenues just to discount them, to think, okay, well, that wasn't right, and that wasn't right. This isn't right. This is nearly right. That's definitely not right. And then finally you think, oh, okay, well, this actually here's the right way to go. So it's a good practice that, I think, to learn to be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
For sure. And I feel like as a producer, what you just said there of trying all of the options to see what feels right, what doesn't, that's also a really, really important thing too. Cause musicians always want to add their own flair to something, and, you have to kind of just be open to those ideas to see what comes of it. And if it feels right in the song, then it is right. If it doesn't, then you cut it, but I think it's so important to just be open-minded to experimentation in the writing stage and in the production stage as well.
Yeah, it is. I'm not always the best exponent of that because I'm old now, and I am a grumpy old man. I think, certainly with writing, because I've been doing it so long. Not that that I have all the answers, but if someone who is in their 20s wants to try something that I know I probably would have wanted to try when I was 20, but I know it's not going to. I know 99% sure, you can never be sure of anything, but I'm pretty sure it's not going to work. I'll probably just be too grumpy and shut them down, or not shut them down, but I'll do my best to convince them not to spend the 20 minutes trying to do something that's not going to work at the end of the day. But yes, in an ideal world, if I was an enlightened being, I would encourage that practice.
I love that. That's great. Yeah. Hey, you're right though. It's like, you've got that experience. So you've tried it. You've been there. You've done it. If it hasn't worked in the past, what makes you think it's going to work again? Right.
Yeah. It's that. Yeah. That sort of thing. I'm probably sounding like a dick now, but that's full disclosure.
No, but I think that it, again, comes back to that idea of patterns. So it's like, you found the patterns of things that work and you found the patterns of things that don't. So if you have that experience and that knowledge, then you know what the outcome's going to look like.
Yeah, probably know better. I just found as we all do, we all reach a stage in life where we can recognize we can recognize when something isn't right earlier on in the process. And something that I used to, scratch my beard about for 3 months, not quite understanding why a chorus wasn't working. I can, once you do lots of them, you can spot it early days, and then it saves you a lot of time and effort. And then, of course, I'm always going to become a cropper where I think I know something, and then someone said something, and we've pursued it, and they've been right. So there's always going to be an exception. But yeah, it's nice. It's a nice place to get to. I don't know how old you are, Mike, but when you get to a place where you recognise the patterns, like you say, and you can spot them earlier than usual, or earlier than you could in your 20s or 30s. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that every now and then you will get the people who have that. They're gonna go for that thing that you feel in your gut isn't going to work, and sometimes they'll surprise you. And like you said, you get those moments where sometimes they are right, but it's another learning experience. And you learn from that, and you realize, okay, well, if we're going to go this way, maybe it worked because of X, like you figure out why that worked. And now that's another tool in the back pocket, ready to go whenever someone else wants to bring up something like that, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. I know that you also do a lot of like composition and cinematic stuff as well. And I was wondering how the writing process differs when you're working on something like that versus writing for a specific artist.
I think the process is the same. It's just finding something, a little starting point, a melody that you like, and a little starting point that you like. So I'd say it's very similar. What I do tend to do now is that I won't labour over an idea for too long. It'll be I'll get it down in 30 seconds, and then I'll leave it. I think I just, with whatever idea I come up with, I try and regain my perspective on it, because as soon as you've started shaping that idea, you're slowly losing perspective. I always think the best tool a producer could have in his toolkit is one of those devices they have in Men in Black, where they wipe everyone's memories. And you can wipe your own memory of the idea you've just had, and then just listen to it with fresh ears. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'll just, I'll always have a few different projects going. I'll have 5 or 6 Pro Tools sessions on the go, and I'll just flip between them all, trying to refresh or trying to use a an ear sorbet to neutralize my ears, and to re-listen to the idea again to tell whether it's okay or whether it needs modifying. So often I'll go in and think, well, hang on a minute, no, that shouldn't go there, it should go there instead. So I've got this nice little rhythm of over the course of a week where I'll just revisit ideas that I've got bubbling away, and I'll incrementally make little changes until I think I've got the overall shape of a song in terms of sonics and composition. And then I'll start doing the detail work.
That's very interesting. And I totally agree with you. I think that, if we had those Men in Black devices, but even if it didn't completely erase your memory, but if it just made you think from like the audience perspective, sometimes if you could just flip that way, as opposed to being the writer,
Yeah, I think we can modify it to do that. Mike. Yeah. That would be inconvenient if it completely wipes your memory. Why am I in a studio?
And I also think that they need to make like a mixing version of it as well that just tells you like, no, this sucks.
This is not. The drums are way too loud. I think we're running before we can walk. I think we need to just figure out how to wipe everyone's memory first. We'll start modifying it. I mean, it'd be great if we could make a healthy lunch too.
Yeah, let's work on this. This is our joint plugin that we're going to make.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, you've had a great career as a songwriter, and I know that there's a lot of people out there who are listening to this podcast who maybe don't want to go the route of being like a full-time engineer, but instead they want to be a professional songwriter and work with other artists, much like yourself. What advice do you have for people who are trying to figure out how to start as a professional songwriter? Like, what resources should they be looking into? Where should they start?
Okay, well, I think a good way to do this is to buy a Tony Robbins book or something of a similar ilk. I'm really doing his publicity tonight, aren't I? Is buy one of his books, get into get into the right state, meaning a state where you feel inspired and excited. There are ways and means to do that. And then to devise what Mr. Robbins would call a massive action plan, MAP, which is, what is my goal? Who do I want to write with ideally? How am I going to get there? And then how am I going to do that? And you make a few different stages, including the first step you're going to make. So I think, whilst also finding out what your strong points are and listening to people's feedback. In music, especially, you often get told what you want to hear. People don't want to tell you the truth, and it's very hard to be really candid with someone and to tell them that a song isn't good or that they're barking up the wrong tree. I think you need really robust, reliable feedback coupled with a huge action plan that you are going to adhere to every day. You're going to get yourself into the right state and, kind of get on a mission. You be tenacious and figure out what you want to do, and you'll work it out, whether that means going to a gig, mixing with people that know the band or artists you want to work with, or that we could go on all night talking about best ways to get with a band or get to meet the right people. But it starts with that. It starts with getting a plan together, taking huge, massive action, and listening to the feedback you're getting, and requests people give you straight answers and not the answers you want to hear.
That's great advice. And it goes back to what you said kind of maybe half hour ago, where we were talking about just the importance of having a broad circle of friends, people who you can trust, who will tell you straight up how it is.
Yeah. I mean, friends are good. I think non-music friends. My wife tells me I've stopped working on songs with change of direction or something. My wife's listened to a few seconds and usually been disparaging about something, and then I've changed my course of action. But yeah, to have a wide circle of friends try and get honest answers, but also honest answers from people in the industry that know what they're talking about too, and just be persistent. There's so many ways to get to artists now, or to get through to people. I think it's quite an exciting time.
Yeah, that's great advice. Great advice. Well, Julian, I don't want to take up too much more of your day, but we can start to wrap up here. If people want to learn more about you and maybe follow you online, what's the best way for them to do that?
That's a good question. I don't do much Instagram. I'm on Facebook. I haven't really embraced the social media thing, but it's I think my manager's website usually got the artists that I've just been working with on recently, and usually on Facebook. I don't do a business Facebook, just my general Facebook. I'll have if I've just finished a record, I've had some success, then I'll always post about it. Other people seem to like to hear about it. So yes, friend requests on Facebook at the moment, I think. Pretty old school.
Awesome. And lastly, are there any cool projects that you're working on right now that you can talk about?
Most interesting one, probably the singer of Nothing But Thieves, Connor Mason. I'm batting some ideas back and forth with Nothing But Thieves, and I think I've forgotten the artist's name. Eli Wood. Is it Eli Wood? I'm just checking his name out now. I've got coming up. It's great, really great singer. Often my manager will just send me different artists that may be interested in working with me. So he was really good. And also a band called Sour, which is kind of my own project with a pal of mine called Ted Griggs, and Ted is a super talented guy. That's just on Spotify recently. Sour, and look out for anything Nothing But Thieves or Nothing But Thieves related coming to a store near you soon.
Amazing. I'll have to check all of that out. Well, Julian, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to do this podcast. There was so much awesome stuff. I think anyone who's thinking of becoming a songwriter, they've got a lot to unpack from this episode. So I really appreciate all the amazing advice.
Hey, it's a real pleasure. It's really good talking to you, Mike.
So that was my interview with Julian Emery, and that was a great episode. I love all of the advice that he gave us all about songwriting and getting into it, and really just finding your own patterns that allow you to succeed, and all of the stuff that he was getting into about Tony Robbins and all that. It definitely shows that he has a persistence to him that has allowed him to keep moving forward, keep making those contacts, expanding his network, and it's definitely paid off. He's worked with some amazing artists, and I think that if you follow a lot of the advice that he gave here today, you'll see a lot of success with your own music as well. So, Julian, if you're listening to this, thank you so much for being on here. Really had a great time and would love to have you back at some point. Now, if this is your first time listening to the podcast and hearing about Master Your Mix, make sure to visit MasterYourMix.com. That's where I help musicians create professional recordings from their home studios so that you can use these songs to showcase your talents in the best way possible and to use these recordings to help grow your career as well. So visit MasterYourMix.com, and when you get to the website, I'm currently offering a free guide to using EQ and compression in your mixes. That's called the Ultimate Mixing Blueprint. So when you get to the website, you're going to see a link pop up that will ask you for your email, and you can download that for free. And that's going to just really point you in the right direction as far as cleaning up your tracks, knowing when to boost and cut things with EQ, what kind of compression settings to use, all so that you can make your mixes sound nice and clear right away and not have to guess at what you're doing or not have to rely on presets that aren't going to help you. So once again, visit MasterYourMix.com, and that's where you can sign up for that. So with that said, that is today's episode. Guys, thank you so much for joining me here today. I had a lot of fun. It's great to be back, and looking forward to putting out more episodes for you guys soon. All right, we'll talk soon. Take care. Thanks for listening to the Master Your Mix podcast.
To have your questions answered, submit your questions to questions@masteryourmix.com. Please go to iTunes and subscribe and leave a review. And for more information on how you can improve your mixes, visit MasterYourMix.com.